Hey guys, welcome to another voiceover tutorial. My name is Takumi-chan, and for this voiceover tutorial, we're gonna go back to talk about something very fundamental to digital artists, and that is blending. Now, I've done quite a bit of blending tutorial in the past, but I thought I'd do a new one, a bit more detailed, a bit more updated. Now this voiceover tutorial, I'm going to do a pretty simple concepted blending tutorial. We're going to go ahead and do start off from scratch, sketch it out, do liner, fill that in, and start blending. And we're going to see how far we're going to take it before it gets too much. So we're going to do too much blending versus not enough, and we're going to just show the difference and some of the I guess you could call it mistake, depending on what style you're gonna go for. Sometimes, your style requires a bit less blending, sometimes a bit more, and sometimes it's just too much. So we're gonna take a look at that. Now let's get started with that, and we're gonna start off with a sketch. We're just gonna do our usual simple portrait. So starting off, usually how I like to start, using always the standard round brush in Photoshop. And always, of course, make sure that you have transfer on, or if you have earlier version of Photoshop, it is the second last from the first this box here. It's the second last one. So get that on, and you should see these options, and just make sure everything says 0%. Control both at pen pressure, and you should be good to go. So if you have that, you should see pretty smooth lines, and that's what we're gonna sketch with. And of course, gotta switch my mode up here to normal, otherwise it's gonna be all wacky. So let's start off by sketching out our character. I'm feeling like a side bang, and then maybe lift it up, clip to the side, and the face. This face looks a little long, and I think we're gonna go with maybe we can go with braids. Let's go with braids. So I'm just gonna sketch out a portrait here for us to work on as an example. I wanna do something where it'll be easy to notice blending mistakes. Okay, that's probably not the best when it comes to hair. When you want to show the body, sometimes when I sketch character, I have to think about the posing and the hair element. If they have long hair, short hair. Long hair tends to sometimes in your composition, sometimes tends to block off the rest of the body, and sometimes you want to show most of the anatomy, and that's where I fall into. So play around with the hair a lot to see which position is the best one. So let's go ahead and give her a cute top. Probably gonna go like that, and I suppose we could, oops, I was gonna erase parts of it. Let's do this type of where her hair is kind of sweet. And of course the face, I usually like to do a little X here to indicate where everything is. The nose, eyes, and just sketch out the eyes, usually around this area of the guy. Usually I like to keep it simple, not too much detail, because we're gonna we're gonna be, well, usually I would be painting in the details, so I wouldn't need to kind of sketch it initially. I'll just keep that simple. Let's do a cute V-top, and then of course close that off. Let's make the side sweep bang a bit more obvious here. Something like that. Okay, we'll just start off with this, and we're gonna use the sketch as our base for this tutorial. Of course, when you first start a character, get that guide going, the sketch guide. And of course, sometimes after you sketch, you probably want to flip it over a few times to make sure that it's looking okay. Sometimes you won't be able to see mistakes if you don't do this, because your eyes get so accustomed to the side that you're working on. So anyways, great. We have our sketch up, and then I'm gonna do a quick line art and then fill that in, and we can get started. So this phase of the tutorial is something that I've done quite a bit. I should probably made a more general folder for this. So I'm gonna name this sketch. I'm gonna put our sketch layer in here, and then our second one is gonna be line art, and then color, basic color, of course. This way it's a bit more clean. So we're just gonna go ahead and do our line art, pretty similar to the sketch phase. You can maintain similar brush settings, except this time you're gonna try not to make as many lines as you did in the sketch phase, and also maybe reduce the size of your brush as well. So let's just do this very carefully. As you can see, I'm sort of adding a bit more detail, however I'm trying to keep it fairly clean. So here we go. And of course, trying to make sure everything's filled in, all the lines are connecting. That way when we use the fill in tool, it'll be a lot easier to fill in the character fairly easily. So we're gonna go ahead and do the face here, the neck. As you can see, I'm trying to be as clean as possible and trying to get everything in a fairly smooth swoop. Now, some of you have brought to my attention that sometimes when you do line art, it is a little wobbly. Now, that could have something to do with the way you handle the tablet pen. Sometimes, you know, when I first started line art, I was quite wobbly, or when I not even first started, but I've been doing it for a while, sometimes it gets wobbly because your fingers are not steady. And usually if you have the same setting as me, you should be able to obtain a pretty smooth glide. Now, one of you have brought to my attention that they are not able to achieve this, and sadly I think that has to do with the tablet. Since they actually have a pretty good tablet, it was a Cintiq. So Cintiq usually will have this type of result. The only tablet that I can think of that are probably not going to be able to do this smooth level of pressure and smoothness is the Bamboo. The more budget-friendly tablets tends to be less effective when it comes to pen pressure, and pen pressure is what is making your tablet have this nice smooth glide and this tapered ends here, very smooth. So sadly, budget-friendly tablets such as Bamboo tend to be a little less sensitive to that, and that might be a problem if you are facing that. So I would definitely recommend getting, in terms of tablet, either Wacom Ancient, yes. That one is pretty much my go-to before I upgraded to a Cintiq, and of course Cintiqs are pretty good based on my opinion, but you know, some artists prefer not to be drawing directly onto a screen because Cintiqs are pretty much like that, so it's all up to personal preference. Anyways, just talking a little bit about tablet and finishing up the liner. We are almost done. So just keeping it fairly simple. Now you notice how for the eyes I tend to do a little extra streaks here and there, a bit more messy. I tend to kind of just layer on the lines. That's just a habit, because when it comes to eyes, I find it a bit more detail is better, because I don't know, I just find it more appealing and more bold when it stands out against the rest of the body, that you have it fairly light and clean, and you have the eyes a little bit more darker, a little bit more messy. It usually draws the attention of the viewer a bit more, but then again, we're gonna just ditch the lines at some point anyway, so it really depends. So here we are, we have our liner all done. I missed the jawbone right here, and there we have it. There we have it. So now what we're gonna do, I believe these lines are pretty big. Now our canvas is quite big too. Let me just see if we can. Yeah, that's a pretty big canvas. Okay. So we have our lines set up. Now we're gonna move on to the color blocking phase. So get that down here. And we have our lines. Now we're gonna delete the sketch underneath, and this time, in order to have a clean selection, I totally forgot to flip. Let's flip this first to see if our lines are okay. So as you can see, it's looking fairly okay. Maybe this shoulder needs a bit more subtleness. It's smaller. And as you can see, I tend to lean towards this side a bit more. So what we could do is go into Control T transformation, right click, go to distort, and I'm just gonna push this slightly over here so it's leaning more towards that side. So that's something I've noticed. Usually when I draw a character, is I tend to lean towards the right because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, your character might be leaning towards the left. Something I've noticed with my own art. So yeah, so always keep flipping, keep fixing your liner as you go along. Anyhow, what we're gonna do right here is just to make sure everything's closed off. You see right here, there's a gap. Now gaps are not that okay, maybe not. Okay, well, just make sure that your gaps are all filled in so you can have an easier time selecting. So as you can see, I'm going around, making sure all the gaps are filled in the lines. So the lines are all connected, there is no gap. Especially towards the outer silhouette of the character, you gotta make sure that there are no gaps. You can have gaps on the inside but not outside. That way what you do is you select the outside. As you can see, I'm getting fairly clean selection of around the character, and we're gonna fill that in. But before that, I'm gonna go clean up some of the silhouette using this, which is adding on to the selection. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add on certain areas to the selection. As you can see, some of them are not exactly 100% clean. Now I'm being nitpicky. Okay, so now that we have a nice clean selection around the character, go to select, inverse, and fill in your character. So I chose a gray color, and all you have to do is just make a new layer underneath the liner, which I failed to name because I'm pretty messy. And of course you have your base right here. So your liner, base. So there we have it. We got that going. That is done. Okay, so for this tutorial, we're gonna mainly focus on blending, and we're gonna go in depth with blending. So I'm gonna go gonna be a bit more in depth with that. Of course, as always, I'm going to be using the standard round brush, which is like my favorite brush to use in all my paintings, and I think it's the simplest brush to use, more friendly, and it's just easier to focus on one brush. But anyways, we're going to start off with our base, and we're going to paint everything in one layer. Yes, that's right, we're going to paint everything in one layer. So we're going to start off with just very basic picking of skin tones. Now what you're noticing, I am using airbrush right now, and if I click on my little tablet pen, you can see that it is still the standard round brush. However, the hardness is 0%, which means it is airbrush. Airbrush is basically standard round brush, hardness 0%, and if you turn it to 100%, it's solid round brush. Once again, as you can see, quite sharp. So we're gonna make it into airbrush once again. So for this purpose, I'm gonna be using the lasso tool just to select the areas that have different colors. So I'm thinking the hair will be different from the skin tone. Very roughly, I'm gonna use the lasso tool to just select the hair affected areas, and we are going to paint that, fill that hair in with the color that we pick for the hair. And the lasso tool is quite good at doing these type of stuff. It speeds up the whole process quite a bit. So let's go ahead and fill in our hair color. Of course, gonna stick with pink because, as you've noticed, I'm just sticking with pink hair all throughout my tutorials for now, because just giving it more uniform concept altogether. But yeah, so we got the skin, we got the hair, and of course we're gonna go ahead and paint in the top and the choker color. So as you can see, I'm being a little bit messy with these selections, so it's not exactly sticking to the lines. As you can see, the hair is not completely filled in. There's like random gaps there, and you can see the skin tone poking through. You don't really need to be too clean with this because we are not going to be sticking with the line art too much. We're just using the line art for the purpose of just like a basic guide, and we're going to switch after. I'm going to make the top dark color. I think black looks really good with pink and light skin tone. So we have our skin tone going. As you've noticed, I've been kind of filling in everything with the airbrush. You can do it with solid round brush, but I feel that airbrush is very, very easy to use in terms of filling in basic color. So we can do that. Okay, just fill in the whites of the eyes. I feel like making her have really, really pretty blue eyes, because blue usually works well with any warm tones, especially pinky tones. So usually you will see turquoise with bright pink or normal pink with just standard blue, something like that. It's a pretty cute color combination, I think. So here we are, we have our base all done. So now comes the fun part. We were talking about blending. Okay, so we have our base here. Let's start off with blending. Let me just put step 1, make here. I actually want to do it's a difficult concept, but I want to start off with not enough blending to too much blending. So we're gonna start off on a scale of not enough blending to too much blending. Okay, and we're just gonna talk about some of the often made mistakes, I guess. Or, you know what, you can't really call it a mistake, because depending on what type of style you want, it might be purposeful. So we're gonna start off with that. We got our base all done. And of course, right now our color is quite bland, not much going on. I'm gonna go ahead and start off with not enough blending. So sometimes I notice that some certain artists, by choice or not by choice, don't have this option on. So when you go ahead and start layering down the shadow and highlight, it looks very messy. So let's get started with that. Our basic color, and of course we're gonna start layering on shadows first. Sometimes you can go ahead and do highlights first, but I find it usually I prefer going with shadow first. So we're gonna go ahead and do as messy job as we can for the sake of giving the example. So of course we're still gonna try to make an effort, but you know, not too much that it's gonna look good, because we're trying to set an example of what not to do, I guess. So something like that. And of course, go here into the skin tone, pick a darker color for the shadow, and just get that started here. Kind of messy. So as you can see, I am actually layering on a decent amount of shadow. However, I'm not blending it. But you can still tell that it's there. And of course, the dark color. There we go. So, okay, probably one more layer. So I'm gonna keep on layering the shadow here. And now I'm gonna go ahead and do the hair. This is some of the things that I've actually seen from artists online, as well as some of you when you send me your stuff for critique. It's not bad, however it is missing some blending steps, but you know, it's you got one down, which is to put in highlight and shadow. So something like that, not very blended. However, you do have, you know, your basic oh god, your basic shadow and highlight. Probably not as detailed as this, however, I think this is a good example, and then I'm gonna put in the highlight tone for the clothing as well. So there we have it. That is our one of the blending not enoughs, I guess you could call it. So on a scale of, I guess I could do five steps. So this would be step 1, which is not very blended. But we have all our basic tones. So you can definitely actually start off like this if you prefer. It's something fairly simple. However, you would need to put in those shadow, highlight, and basic tones. You start off all of them and then you start blending them pretty much. Alright guys, let's continue. So we're gonna start blending, however we're going to be using a fairly challenging brush to blend. So we're gonna still sticking with our super difficult to work with brush with literally no pressure. So as you can see, every stroke I take with my brush is very solid. There's no transition shade. So we have to make them. The way you do this, if you don't have good pressure on your tablet pen, you just have to turn down your opacity. Normally, you can leave your opacity 100% with your pen pressure and it blends really well. However, if you do not have pen pressure, you turn down opacity, and what you do is kind of just do this type of stuff where you still pick the color up with your water drop tool, which is this little guy. I think by default, Photoshop set the shortcut to Alt. If you hold Alt, it appears. When you release, it's gone. So you click Alt, select color, layer it down. Click Alt, select color, layer it down. You would do the blending this way for this type of blending with no pressure and the blending with pressure. So as you can see, I am blending. It's actually happening, but it's tough. So as you can see, it's a little bit rough, but you know what? It's working. So you pretty much blend this way. If you have bad, bad tablet pen, however, you can't afford a better one, you can still blend this way. It's just gonna be a little tough. But hey, I've been here. I used to blend like this literally because it was a choice of style, I suppose. I kind of dig this style. But anyways, you can blend this way. Select color, lay it down, and the opacity 47%. Of course, you can experiment with more opacity or less opacity. And you know what? Some artists have this type of a bit rougher style, and I believe this is how they go about it. But hey, it's not really that much difference, really. So you end up blending this way. Very, very rough. But you are still achieving somewhat of a volume. So I'm just gonna blend all those colors together. As you can see, it's quite rough. But if you dig this type of style, go for it. This is actually a really cool style, and one of the artists that I really admire have this type of a bit more rougher, paintery style. To be honest, you can make anything work as long as you have that shading and highlight down. You need to have those two to make it work. Except I guess if you're aiming for more of a cartoony style with not a lot of shading. But if you want a more semi-realistic style, definitely need to have those highlight and shading down. So as you can see, blended that. Still pretty rough, but you can definitely see that it's definitely coming together. Of course, let me just put in those eyebrow details and the eye details. And we probably need to put a bit of shadow in the eye, so I select the eye color right here with my trusty eyedrop selector. Alt click and you get that, and I'm gonna move it down for the shadow color, and same with the eye color. So gonna select the shadow tone for her eyes, so something like this. Of course, kind of working on the eye here. So of course you're gonna have a bit more trouble with the eye area because it is such a small area to paint in, and you probably need to turn down the opacity to get more detailed with it. So something like this. I used to blend like this all the time. It took so much time. It was so difficult. As you can see, opacity at 7%, you can get this like gradient, but it's choppy, right? It's a bit choppy. You can see all the brush strokes. But hey, if you dig that style, go for it. So, you know what? This is actually not too bad, but it is pretty messy, as you can see. It's a little messy. So messy blending. So I'm gonna name this O1. I'm gonna show you guys another something a bit less pretty, I guess. Another blending thing that I've seen before. This is another style. So this one is a bit more interesting. So turn on the opacity. Maybe turn that down a little bit. So basically, probably don't really have much. If you don't really know how shadow and highlight work, you might not be able to do something like this. Perhaps a bit less 3D looking, so a bit more flat, I've noticed. Without much shading, without much tone variation, it could turn a bit more flat and less contrast. So somewhat like this. I've also seen it somewhat like this, where it's a little bit washed out. You have a little bit of shadow highlight everywhere, but it's not enough to create a more 3D look, like this versus this. So there is also this where I guess it could be either a mistake or a choice of style where the artist chose or have a habit of not building up the darkness in the character. They just sticking very, very light to their shading color, very light. So it tends to be a bit more washed out. I'm gonna put some blush on the character just for that variation. I feel like this is a bit more leaning towards stylized anime style. Somewhat like this. So right here, it's a little bit more washed out. I should probably put this here first and this here second. Blending. Name this one and then 2. Blending rough. I'm gonna name it blending rough because it is quite rough. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to blending more even. I guess I could call it more even. This is the one that I prefer personally because I like to have a combination of hard blending and soft blending at the same time. Right here, mostly it is hard blending, very, very blotchy and rough. Again, it is a stylistic choice. Some artists prefer this way. Just giving you guys some suggestions in case you are still looking for that style. So, gonna go ahead and start evening out this right here. So first thing that we could do to even this out is to, of course, turn back our option right here. We need that option transfer on so that we can blend with a combination of soft edges and hard edges. So now that we have that selected, as you can see, it's going to be so much easier. It glides on so much easier. So just with that setting down, we are already kind of just able to blend properly. So what I'm gonna do for this is only use the solid round brush. We're not gonna touch the airbrush or any blending options such as the smudge tool. So we're gonna purely just use the standard round brush. But as you can see, I'm able to create a fairly smooth finish with even just with the solid round brush. But of course we need to be blending with those hard edges in somewhat. So as you can see, lay down that shadow color. I'm going to blend this area out by pressing Alt, select the color, lay it down, Alt, select the color, layering down. So I'm doing it quite fast, but that's essentially how blending works, how I blend anyways. Okay. Alright, now just do it for the other area as well. Go ahead and place the darker color and then slowly blend that in. Use a very light hand with this. You are opacity 100%, but you can still have very, very smooth transition. Just have a very light hand. Now you probably probably won't be able to get this amount of glide or transition, like soft transition, and that is usually due to the type of tablet you use. If you're not able to do what I'm doing right now, your tablet probably don't have enough pressure built into it, and that again is due to budget tablets. They usually do not have that much pressure, sadly. So I would recommend, if you can, get a second-hand Wacom Intrus. That brand is pretty good. And you know what, if your Intrus is doing choppy action, not smooth gliding, then probably the tablet drive. So I'm just kind of thinking about all these problems that I hear from you guys, and the only solution I'm thinking is just to restart your computer, reinstall the tablet drive, or get a new tablet if you have one of those budget tablets. If you can, of course. Okay, so we got that blended. The hair is pretty smooth, even though I don't like this type of hair rendering. I'm probably gonna fix it later. But as you can see, I can switch between both hard edges by pressing really hard on my tablet pen and soft gliding edges by just like using a light hand with my pen. So you can essentially blend like that, and just gonna go everywhere with it. As you can see, I'm still being quite messy. I'm coloring outside the line sometimes, you see, but that's okay because we are going to be minimizing the line as we go. I'm just going to kind of blending that top up. As you can see, just going to select the color that's already in place and just adding additional detail, at the same time blending in those details. Of course, you can see I'm a little bit outside the lines everywhere, so I'm going to try to keep it fairly clean. However, you don't need to worry too much about it. You can be a little messy, but then again, if you are planning to keep the liner, try to be as clean as you can. Of course, gonna go into that color and add a bit of that highlight, and of course blending that in, using always using a fairly soft touch with the tablet pen to get the most out of that transitional soft gliding. Okay, now for the face. So the face, you know what, usually you could use the blur tool and the face would be not the blur tool, the smudge tool, and the face would be done in an instant. However, since we are gonna do everything with our trusty standard round brush, it might take a bit more time. Just go ahead and do the picking up the color, blending it in, picking up the color, blending it in. But it's not too bad. I'm just going to pick a bit more vibrant color here, and then perhaps a bit of a warmer shadow, and then plop that down here. Let me put a bit of that blushy pink tone on the nose. Usually that gives a bit of a variation on the skin tone itself. Usually you want to have a combination of kind of, you know, the standard skin tone, the beige, and then you want to add a bit of that warmer tone, like a blush color, either a red or orange, or a bit of a pinker tone onto the face, and that creates a bit of a variety, which, you know, tends to happen in real life. You see a lot of colors on your face, so we want to kind of transition that into digital painting as well. So usually I like to put a bit of you know, sometimes even a bit of blue as well, because naturally human skin tone has blues, greens, purples, and whatnot in them. Anyways, just keep blending your character. I'm just going to transition her makeup a bit. I think I'm gonna give her a smoky eye, so oh no! Still keep it at that solid round brush. Of course you can switch to airbrush, but for the sake of this video, I want to show you guys the level of blending. So get that blue going, maybe very gradually transition. She looks kind of Russian. And then maybe add a little detail to the eyes, to the lips. So you can definitely obtain a fairly good amount of blending purely by using the solid round brush. It just depends on how you use it, also how much you're willing to spend time on kind of transitioning each shade to a smoother finish. Let me add a bit of a shadow here and inside the ear. The ear is probably one of my most areas of the face that I like to paint the least, because it's like such a small area with so much detail that you have to consider. All my ears look a little off. Like usually my ears are not the best. They usually look a little off. There we go. And if you think any part of your picture looks off, always make sure to have some sort of reference by your side. I always encourage you guys to have reference, because that is what's going to help you improve more or less. Okay, so we have that blended, as you can see. Let's put it side by side. Check it out. I just pretty much smooth it all out using the same brush, essentially, just with added pen pressure, of course. Shows you that if you spend long enough, I'm sure this can look a little bit more blended, and this could probably look a lot more blended. But everything is possible. Well, not everything, but there's a lot of possibilities with digital art. You can achieve so many styles by doing this type of stuff, and you can discover what your personal style or what your personal preference is like. So now I'm just going ahead and adding various little shadow details just for the anatomy, because sometimes, you know, anatomies, there's subtle shadows here and there, subtle crevices here and there. So I'm just gonna add that in, and I'm gonna plop in a bit of that skin tone into the dark clothing, because dark and light clothing have a tendency to pick up colors that is surrounding it, whether that's skin tone or just background elements like the sky. Usually they like to pick up a little bit of it, so sometimes I like to go ahead and add some skin tone to the clothing if it's dark, especially. I can even add a little bit to the hair. Now I kind of want to work on the hair because it's looking a little washed out, so I'm gonna go ahead and put in a bit more of that intense pink. Just going to correct the hair up and layer it with a bit more pink in there. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is, I'm thinking I want to have a bit of shadow here, especially around the hair where it's overlapping the body. So just selecting a very dark shade and very lightly layer on top a shadow color. So as you can see, it's very messy. So after you do that, you have to go back into blend it out or transition into the skin tone. Sometimes the tone is a little bit too gray, so you can go back to add a bit more bright, warm shadow tone. There we go. After that, we can blend it in some more, like this. And now the other cleavage is kind of being obstructed by all the shadows. So I'm gonna bring some of that back, add a bit of highlight there to emphasize the other cleavage. Okay, there we go. Gonna lighten up her other side of the the shirt. And of course blend that in. There we have it. I'm also gonna make it a bit more obvious of where the lighting, so before I thought it was gonna come from here because of the face. The lighting seems to come from the right side. However, the shoulder looks like the lighting's coming from the left side, so we have to correct the face shading. So yeah, a lot of the times you can make some subtle mistakes such as this. However, it's not too bad, because you can either correct it and just be like, you know what, in art you can do a lot of stuff that you can't do in real life, so you can also say, oh, it's by choice, you know, artistic freedom, where, you know, you don't have to paint super realistic, so you can kind of get away with it. It's certainly a personal preference kind of thing, but I'm gonna go ahead and adjust the shadow accordingly to match this coming from the left side. Even though the shadow over here is kind of confusing. But it's okay. It's personal preference. Do what you feel looks good. I paint to be appealing. I do not paint to stick to the rules specifically. Sometimes I try to kind of stick to the rules as much as I can, but in the end, when I paint, I'm always thinking, oh, what's gonna look good to me and to my fans. So I usually paint based on that, and not like, oh, does the wind is it logical that the wind blows in both directions and the character's hair fluttering everywhere? I remember I got a few comments about how the wind direction don't make sense because of the hair fluttering everywhere, and it didn't make sense that it was going both directions. But then again, it did fill out the canvas, so you really have to decide for yourself to either go for attractiveness, or I guess appealingness to you, or to sticking with what's realistically possible. So you really have to pick and choose sometimes. So you can see I'm also kind of going ahead and correcting some of that hair shadow problem. So I pretty much have to revamp the whole almost the whole shading process. But you know what? I want to make sure that it looks good. So as you can see now, it's a bit more blended, a bit more logical too. Check it out. I think I like this a lot better. I'm gonna give her still a bit of a rosier complexion. So this is, as always, something that you should always do when it comes to painting character. Even if they're zombies, they still have different color tones in different areas of the face, and if you just give it that extra little variant in the tone of their face, you'll see that your character will look a lot more alive. Paint in that nose nostril. There we go. And there we have it. Kind of digging it now. Okay, so this is our first step into something more my style, where it's a combination of soft and hard edges. So this is what I consider to be fairly well blended, a good enough level. Like, you can just stop at this level if you want. However, if you're feeling a bit more nitpicky, you can be even more blended. Okay, so with this, let's go back here and start blending it a lot more. So at this face, I like to slowly remove my line art. So now it's turning into a painting. Alright, so for this one, we're going to kind of just start cleaning everything up here. So an important part of good blending is to have a smoothness at least based on for my style anyways, have good smoothness within the silhouette and have the silhouette be sharp on the outside. So that means all the separate elements should be quite sharp. So for this, I'm gonna start blending in a bit more using the smudge tool, which have the following setting. So you have the smudge tool, the standard round brush, and then just have the scatter option on at 30% off and off, and that is my setting. Just have a look at that, try it out, see if you like it. You can always experiment with it as well. So let's just go ahead and start blending some of these rougher edges out. As you see, I am only blending in certain areas and leaving others alone because I still want to retain that sharpness. And of course, if you want even more clean, sharp edges, use the lasso tool to block in those areas where you want to blend using very soft brushes such as airbrush. However, you don't want those edges to become overly soft, so use the lasso tool to retain the shape while having pretty good blend. Of course, you don't want to blend too much either. You just have to find the right amount. I think this should be okay. And I'm going to invert so I can work on this side too. So now I'm working on the top here and going to work on here too. So using the lasso tool is very convenient if you want to keep it fairly clean. Also, I'm gonna clean up the shoulder as I've noticed that it's a little bit messy, but you know what, if you don't mind having some small details that isn't 100% blended in, that is also fine. I'm just nitpicking at this point. So now we have the hair now. Gotta blend in that hair. So always sticking to my solid round brush. Of course, we've added the component of blur, blending it in using the smudge tool, and now we've added the airbrush. So we're going to use all three tools. So that is solid round brush, airbrush, and blending it in with the smudge tool. So we have three tools now, and these three tools I think are the best for painting, blending, and whatnot. It's like a really good combination. So you have plop the color down, you blend it in, you think it's a bit too smooth, you put back the sharpness using the solid round brush. So it's pretty much constantly, oh my gosh, it's lagging a little bit. It's a constant thing where you have to blend, and then put back the sharpness, blend and put back the sharpness. That's pretty constant. Okay, and I'm just gonna use the lasso tool to secure that clean silhouette so that it doesn't get out. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put down a different type of shadow. And then of course put down a bit of that skin tone up there just for that nice reflective black dark material. Dark colors tend to reflect a lot of its surrounding colors, so that's why it's there. And of course blend that in, and if you're feeling lazy, use the smudge tool to blend it in quite easily, just like that. And still, of course, I maintain the shape of the what's it called, the shirt, the dark shirt, and then work on the hair a little using the solid round brush. Usually, because hair strands, if you make them airbrush, it might look a little bit too soft. So for hair, I usually stick to solid round brush. Sorry, I burped there. That's why I didn't speak. So solid round brush all the way for the hair. As you can see, it's starting to get there. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little bit more shadow to the face, and then I'm going to switch to the airbrush just to actually airbrush, hardness 0%, just to kind of soften the neck area up. And then while you are at the airbrush, you can slightly add some sort of shadow, just very slightly. And of course, now that you add the shadow, you notice that everything's really soft here, so you have to go back. Yes, that's right. We're going back and forth between two airbrush and then restoring the silhouette back. So we're gonna go back to the collar because it was getting a bit washed out, restoring that collar shape, sharpness. Put a bit of skin tone here, put a bit of skin tone there on both sides to make it feel a bit more reflective, and there you go. Now it's back to being sharp. And as you notice, the hair is also in need of a bit of a sharpen up to clean out the edges because it's been airbrushed quite a bit due to the blending of the face and the rest of the body. So just clean that area up. See, now it's all nice and clean. And we go here, select the ear and the hair because this area needs a bit more sharpening up as well in terms of defining the edges, since we use the airbrush to blend the neck, so it kind of got over the hair area and it looked kind of muddy. So go back to the hair area again to add that sharpness back. There we go. So deselect, as you can see, it's sharp again. And just going to kind of blend that in again. Opacity 100%, only with our pressure setting on, transfer on, and it should have this type of effect. And of course, keep in mind to use a very light hand with this, and it should give you similar results to what you see right here. And just needs practice. Other than that, all you need is practice to get used to how this type of blending works. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go ahead, start blending a little bit more using the lovely smudge tool. Smudge tool is honestly really good on Photoshop. And as you can see, I blended out pretty much all of her face using it, and I'm of course trying to kind of not blend too much, leaving some of those areas behind but blending most of it. And of course, after you do that, you gotta go back in to add the details, otherwise it's gonna look like a hot mess. It's gonna look too Photoshop, too airbrush, and that's not what we want. We still want people to be able to distinguish like the silhouette of the character's nose, eyebrows, and stuff like that. So we have to go back to fill in those form again, like I'm doing right now, just filling in that eyebrows, sort of like kind of like makeup, I guess, in a way, but with painting. And then of course blend that hair in and just kind of create some of that hair texture using combination of smaller tip solid round brush, and just kind of make that texture for the hair, like little lines that gives the hair very textured look, and usually I like that look. So yeah, keep going for it. It might be a little confusing at first on where to place these lines. However, easy way to keep in mind where to place the line is pretty much imagining your hair as a single piece of tape, and you only put the lines at the end of each tape. So this is a piece of tape. I'm trying to create some weird analogy, but this is the end of the tape because, you know, you got your hair separation here. You only put the lines here and here usually, so that creates a nice hair texture. And just keep that in mind. Also, another way to determine where to put those texture is where you see like intersection between the hair and another object, mainly your face. If let's say the ear is here, you would put the line texture near, especially near the ear, to give the impression that the hair is being bent by the ear, which is pretty true, like, you know, behind the ear. That way you can definitely see a bit of that deformation already. And of course, you put a bit of textured lines where the two hair parts meet. So this area. And then of course where your hair meets your face, you put a bit of texture here too, and here. Texture here, and texture at the end as well, to give that hair-like texture. Now I've said texture plenty of times. Okay. My Photoshop is lagging slightly. So kind of like that, just a bit of texture in general now, just all around, just slightly. And of course you can kind of do a few sparse lines, and then when it comes to like another section like this area, you want to focus a lot of lines here. This will give the impression that the hair has a variety of thickness, and like thickness in the separate batches, which is always a good idea to make it seem like your hair is in batches. You don't want your hair to be one single piece. You want it to be like soft, natural, and organic with multiple layers. So that's how I achieve this look. Just have really do this type of line texture look, and then kind of put these lines in different little batches. Now this concept might be a little confusing at first if you first start out, but I think if you do this enough, you know, you don't even need my help at this. It just comes naturally, which I find I pretty much kind of just started doing this after at some point, I don't know when, but I've been painting for a while, and then all of a sudden I do this. Okay, I discover something, even though other artists do as well. I'm just saying that sometimes if you paint enough, you will kind of just figure stuff out naturally, I guess, without people telling you. It's just the more you practice, the more you'll probably discover stuff. Anyways, right now this area is looking a little even. I want to make the patch a little uneven, so I'm going to go ahead and add shadow in this entire area like that, and then I'm gonna have a brighter highlight here and there. So just very random areas, not everywhere, to give that more natural hair look. And then for the eyes, I haven't really worked on it. Just I'm gonna use the airbrush. Just gonna airbrush that in. There we go. Very subtle. Usually with the eye area, you can probably use more airbrush than solid round brush, because it really requires a bit more blending in that area. You really want to make sure it's nice and soft. So I'm just using the airbrush for this, giving her that smoky makeup look. I'm going back to the nose. I'm gonna paint a cute button nose, sort of like this, and just kind of outline the eyes a little better. Emphasize the shadow here, gives a nice definition to the nose bridge. And then for the lips is pretty tricky. I also have a problem painting the lips sometimes. You really have to be sort of detailed with the lips. So going in with the line first to add that shadow. She's gonna have fairly small lips. And then after that I'm gonna go in to blend it out. You can also use the smudge tool to blend it out. Usually I use the smudge tool. Okay, I did a random dot here, I gotta fix that. So I'm gonna go in here, blend that out, and there we have it. And probably gonna put a dot in the eyes just to give a bit more life to the eyes. And then after that, gonna give it a bit of eyelash detail. That way it kind of helps separate the super smoothness of the eyes, pretty much. Then paint in some eyelashes, kind of making them random-ish, making them pretty fluffy too. And of course you have the tear duct. Gonna select that pink hair color that I already have and put it on the very end of the eye, and then also lining the bottom waterline with that pink. There we go. And then last but not least, put a bit of highlight at the center of the tear duct. You know, you see this a lot in, if you go on YouTube, the makeup tutorials, they also do this. And you can pretty much do the same thing when it comes to painting as well. A lot of the makeup techniques you can definitely transition to 2D if you're interested in that. There we go. Darken up those eyebrows. Maybe give her like a mole or something for fun. And then the lips. Just gonna put a little bit of shadow at the end of each corner of the mouth. That adds a little bit of indentation in the face that you know what, might make your character look a little bit more lively. And then gonna highlight the chin here, and then probably add a bit more shadow in the whites of the eyes using the solid round brush, or you could use the airbrush as well. It's really up to you. I'm going to lighten also the eye color slightly. I want to make the eyes pop a bit more. Usually I like, I think dark makeup looks really good against light eyes, so there we have it. That's a bit more blended. This is what I would consider probably my standard of blending, where it's soft but it still has the sharp edges, which is quite important when you blend. You still want to make sure you can tell all the details apart from each other. Just gonna go ahead and kind of give it a bit more detail. And also I would like to add a bit more bright highlight here, like that. There we go. And then of course we're going to blend that out using the smudge tool. And that's pretty much it for this. Alright guys, now I'm gonna show you what happens when you overblend. Now this is pretty, I think it's more of a common mistake. Let me think of a name to name the folder. Rough, even, blending too much. So, let's see what happens when you blend too much. For this example, I'm gonna take this one. We're not gonna take the... Oh, what happened? Okay. We are going to be taking this one, and we're gonna start blending too much. So another problem that I see quite a bit is when some of you or other artists blend a little too overboard without actually concerning for the without any concern for the shape of it. And because usually I see this in paintings, I'm going to merge my liner with the painting I'm going to show you guys. So oftentimes I see that you guys or other artists just go ahead and pretty much they only use airbrush. I'm going to do a really bad job with this because I want to show you guys that this happens and it's not a good idea. So pretty much I'm not really concerned too much about oh gosh, probably not that bad. I don't even see, like, all the edges are overly smooth, and this is quite a something I would consider not very good to do, but you know what? Some people like this style. You can probably do this a lot better too. I've seen this one style where all the edges are soft, but it looks so good because the blending inside the character was excellent. Like it had edges, it had shape. You know what? This is actually not too bad. I'm gonna have to step up my game on making this look bad. But yes, I do see this quite a bit where they don't exactly have the edges blended, so you always see it as this very blurry mess. But hey, this can totally work, I assure you. This is actually looking not too bad, and the reason being, it's still very visibly nice and sharp inside the character. So let's just do this. Let's blend. Make the hair a little bit more fluffy. Oh, actually this is looking good. I was expecting this to look not that good, but it's actually looking pretty nice. Okay, so let's say that you can pretty switch up your blending game a little. Just leave the outside a little bit more blurry than usual, like this. So as you can see, outside is quite blurry, but still looks good. Most likely due to the face. I need to mess this up a bit more. Let's use the smudge tool to blur this. Let's blur this out a bit more. There we go. Okay, so I guess this could be kind of the in-between between too much blurring. I mean, a bit more blurring on top of the more refined character. Probably should have used this example. Probably gonna copy paste her face on here. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Copy paste what I did there. Gonna paste it onto her here. I'm going to line them up. And then, oh, it's actually looking kind of nice. Let me just kind of place her a bit more onto the character. Let's see, okay. Okay, it needs to be moved up a little bit and to the left. Right. Okay, this should be okay. So let me just erase around this right here just to kind of blend them together. So you would consider this a bit more blended, a bit more airbrush, but it's still retaining shape, which is great. It's actually looking really nice. Okay, I guess I was trying to make it seem like too much blending is a bad thing, but you know what? A bit more blending might not be that bad looking after all. Let's see if we can really make this look bad. I think in order to make this look bad, we're gonna start all over, but I'm gonna try. So I see this quite a lot. The nose is not very defined. The lips are not too defined either. The eyes are quite messy because it's overly blended. And then we have the hair is usually not blended this way. It's a bit more blotchy, I think. And usually it's one color. I mean, it's a bit more flat in terms of shadow, so somewhat like that. But hey, if you like this type of style, go for it. And of course, it usually does probably be a bit flatter, somewhat like this, so everything is a bit softer. I should use this tool right here, the smudge tool. But this looks like it's done intentionally. I'm just doing this intentionally to show you guys. I'm trying to be like, oh, this is bad, but it's actually not looking that bad. But as you can see, if you overly blend, you definitely lose quite a bit. So, let's see. So airbrush all of this area here. Airbrush the ear. And then the neck. Which I feel like this is a legitimate technique, just to use airbrush on everything and then add the sharpness after. Hey, that could definitely work. But I see more than none just artists would, I feel like, common mistake, just use Photoshop without actually putting in the highlight and shadow, because you know, when you start out, when you're not sure, you are a little bit more timid when it comes to putting down too much contrast, too much highlight. So oftentimes it turns quite flat. But hey, I think all artists deal with that. It's something that's natural. Like if you're not sure, you tend to be a bit more scared to do stuff, and it's definitely a common thing amongst artists. I'm just trying to kind of emulate that. Not enough contrast, not enough highlight, just very, very flat. So I guess something like this, a bit more muddy, which is, sometimes I see this. Something like that. It's a bit more blurred out. I just want to flatten everything. Flatten. And the eyes, it would be very, very, very light. Which I'm having a hard time making very light. So somewhat like that. And then it's like, it would be very light but very bright at the same time, especially for the whites of the eye tend to be super sharp. I still think it looks okay. Here I am trying to make a point, but it's actually doing the opposite. But hey, you guys, if you are into more of a blended look, this could definitely work for you. Like this, actually not too bad if you just adjust it a little. And this could be a style, you know? Oh, oops, I used the solid round brush, gotta switch to airbrush. If you just adjust the color a little bit, I think everything could look fairly good. So in the end, I think that we all discovered, well, I discovered that, you know what, too much airbrush is not always a bad thing. It could be a stylistic choice for the artist to go all airbrush. Look at this. It's actually quite interesting. And then you will sharpen a little bit on the side to give it just a tad of definition, but everything else would be soft, like this. Of course, I think I need to make it a bit more flat looking. It just doesn't work that well. Okay, but you see what I'm getting at. All of this type of stuff, you can definitely make it work for you in your style. For me personally, I prefer this range right here, where it's these two, where it's in between blended and hard edges. And of course, you know what? If you prefer, you can go with soft edges all the way. I think I need to do a better job at making all soft edges because some of the edges here are not completely soft. There's still some hard edges that I need to take care of, that I need to airbrush, that I need to soften so that gets the point across. Here we go. Soften all that up. Gotta blur everything. So let's just blur everything just to make it super, super out there. So I guess this is a lot. You can kind of do little details, sort of like this, if you're into the style. So start off with super soft and then add like one or two hard edges, usually in forms of hair strands, as you can see. It just adds that extra little detail to make the hair still look like hair despite how overly airbrush it is. So yeah, there we go. In the end, I'm actually liking this result. So yeah, that was not my intention. I wanted to show you guys that over blending might not be a good thing, but you know what? If you have a good base, if you have a good base, look at that. The face still has shape. That's why I was feeling like it doesn't look too bad, because the face had definition. Okay, we have to blur this out. Make sure that there is literally no definition going on. There we go. Now all the lines are blurry. It's all muddy. It's perfect. There we go. Now it's looking not that great. Okay. So as you can see, if you don't have any sort of shape, it looks muddy. But if you blend a lot, but you have some sharpness still retaining in there, it might look good. That is the lesson for both of us today. Still have some harsh shape here, but yeah, just wanted to give you guys an example of overly blended. I need to just make this a little bigger because her face was getting really blurred in there and super small. Okay, let's blend that in. There we go. So too much blending. I should probably make this slightly darker as well. But to be honest, this is not too bad. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial. My intention were to show you guys a various form of, well, I'm just showing you guys one technique of blending, but I wanted to show you guys what it would be like to have different levels of blending, from just like really not too much blending, you have the shadow and everything down, but not too much blending, and you have also the like super patchy, not really blended, to like okay, fairly blended but still kind of rough sort of style. And then this one is where you combine both soft and sharp edges together, and this is a better version of this where you refine it a little bit more, and this is starting to trend towards a bit more airbrushy look, and this is just completely airbrush, completely soft with no edges, and this is why it looks not too good. You know what? Her eyes still needs to be blurred up like that. So yeah. Actually, I have an idea. Perhaps I need a version of this one right here, and I need to blur this right here. So we are going to airbrush shade this right here and see how it looks. So we're gonna just purely use airbrush for this. 0% hardness. I think this would be a bit more of what I wanted to show you guys, that I think is not a good idea to only use the airbrush, because I know a lot of you know I use airbrush. But some of you take it a little bit too far. I also use a lot of sharpening tools such as the lasso tool and the solid round brush, but yeah. I think the idea of the airbrush being so good at blending, which is actually very true, but if you use it throughout your whole piece, it might end up looking a hot mess. So as you can see, this is looking very, very blurry, not too much definition. Let me just... Come on, you can do it. Oh, it's not looking too well. Okay, get that in there. Trying to make it sharp, but it's very hard. And also I'm trying to do a bad job to give you guys an example of what not to do. You know how you have to always tell your friends what not to do, or your family, and you know how to do it good, but you're trying to make an example for them, so you try your best to make it as horrible as you can, like a horrible job. There we go. So that's what I'm doing. So this is more of what I see when it comes to super airbrush. Not a lot of shape, and it's always slightly soft. Like, you guys do try to blend. I mean, sorry, I keep saying you guys, but yeah, I see this. I see this quite a bit. So they try to blend a little bit between the skin and the hair, let's say, so you have a bit of color of both on each side. The problem with that is there is no sharpness between them when they do need their own space, so they both need some sort of sharpness. So there we go. And sometimes the eyes isn't even dark. Always need to eyeline the character, guys. Sometimes the eyes are very, very pale compared to the character, so oftentimes there might not even be a shadow here. It might just look like this. And then airbrush on the outside and in the inside. Too much airbrush could be a bad thing too. So I guess this would be a better example of how that could look like. And sometimes it's the shadow is a bit too intense and soft. Like this. Okay, I'm trying my best to make a bad example. And then let's darken that up. Yeah, I think so. This could also be something that you try to avoid, just going straight on ahead with airbrush. I recommend airbrush after you've done a good base with the solid round brush. Airbrush is always a secondary phase to use. First you need to shape the character, then airbrush. So if you can do that, you can most likely avoid this problem altogether. But I still think it's a pretty fun exercise. Oh, let me just place that. What? There we go. Let's put this here. It's the thing that you really have to watch out for. So yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed that tutorial. I actually thought it was quite fun, and you know what? I might try some of that overly airbrush technique, but still maintain most of the sharpness on the inside of the character. Just airbrush a little bit on the outside to make it like smooth-ish. It's more of a stylized choice, I suppose. It depends on what style you're aiming for. You know, you can always kind of fancy it up a little bit every now and then. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this voiceover tutorial, and if you have any other suggestions, you can comment below or send me a message. I'm always on the lookout for fun ideas, so I thought this was kind of fun. Anyways, I hope to see you guys in the next voiceover tutorial, and have a great day, guys.